Mohsen Kabir. I'm the moderator of this session. First of all, I should explain something about the presentation. The presenters have decided to, for the coherency of the session, to split the first presentation in two parts. So at the beginning of the session, we will have the first part of the first presentation, and the second part of the first presentation will be at the end of the session. So we will have three presenters. First of all, I want to invite Mr. Rami Soltani to present his presentation. The title of his presentation is Religion, Science, and Genetics. And Mr. Soltani is a researcher in Religious Verism Association and UMass Amherst, and also a researcher in Criterion Association.
Hi everybody, my name is Rami Soltani, and I'm going to talk about my presentation, which is titled as Religion, Science, and Genetics. So the outline of the presentation is as follows. The first one is I'm going to talk about the introduction and the problem statement, and then we'll present the main claims of the presentation, and after that I'm going to provide two reasons of support for that and two arguments. And then I'm going to conclude and present the conclusions. So first of all, it's good to talk about my terminology. The word religion refers to a lot of different meanings. But what I mean by religion is a kind of divine religion that comes from a divine source named God, and who is the omniscience and who was the dominant wisdom. And from now on, if I use the word religion, I mean this type of religion. And second of all, the religious instruction. So we know all of these type of religions include a kind of list of do's and don'ts. And what I'm going to call them is the religious instructions. And actually they are from God for human to obey. The two main questions I'm going to address in this presentation are, the first one is there a reason behind these religious instructions coming from God? We could think about it in two different ways. The first way of thinking is, which I call it the non-rational point of view, is that there is no reason behind that. That's just God's interest and nothing more. We have to obey that because God likes that, and there is no other reason behind that. But the other point of view, which I call the rational one, is that there is a reason behind that. They are all based on God's wisdom. The next question is, which is a kind of related to the first question, is that are they extrinsic or they are intrinsic to us? So what I mean by intrinsic is that do they have a kind of root inside us, or they are just extrinsic things coming from God, just a to-do list, just that's it. To provide the answer for these two questions, I'm going to present my claims, which are actually answers. The first one is the religious instructions are rational, means that there's a reason behind them. And that's actually based on the God's omniscience and God's wisdom. And they're not God's despotic orders. Rather, they are like instructions for us. And the second claim is that all the religious instructions are intrinsic, and they are corresponded to and determined by our genetic structure. To support these claims, I'm going to provide two arguments and two claims. The first one is the wisdom of God argument. But for this argument, I need the very main premise, and that's humans all are confined to their physical structure. They're not able to do something their physical structure doesn't let them to do. And they're all limited to their physical body. And for example, they cannot photosynthesize because they don't have the chlorophyll, they don't have the tools in their body to do that. And also they cannot extract oxygen from water because they don't have gills. But they can breathe because they have lungs, they have the neural system supporting that. They can see because they have eyes, they have the neural system that supports that. And they have the brain parts that control this system. The second premise is that the physical body is determined by the genetic structure. That's actually one of the theories in the community of biology that's highly accepted. So I'm going to use the second premise as this theory presented in the biology. And the third one is that the God's omniscient wisdom necessitates not wanting creatures to do something they can. It's not just a God, but even a wise person doesn't want anyone to do something that he or she can. So putting all these premises together, I can conclude that religious instructions are not beyond our genetic structure. They are somehow genetically possible and doable for us. It means that if something in the religious instructions comes to us, it should be doable for us. For example, nobody will ask us to, for example, run at a pace of 500 miles per hour. And because that's not a kind of thing that people could do. So no one will talk about that in the religious instructions. But everything that there is in the religious instruction is somehow doable for us. And the second argument will present a stronger claim. But before that, I'm going to talk about the premise I will use for that. And that's the physical body of human, and thus their genetic structure determines what is beneficial or harmful to them. To talk about that more, I just wanted to give you two examples. The first one is about two cups. Let's say we have two cups. One of them is metal cup, the other one is glassy. So they are all the same. The only difference is their structure. If you throw them on the floor, one of them breaks, the other one doesn't. But why? The reason is that because they have different structure, they are made of different materials. When the same thing happens to both, they do different things and they react different ways because they have different structures. But that's not only true for cups or these kind of things, but that's true for other creatures like human and also animals and etc. And for human, we know that their DNA changes under the high radiation, and they're not able to fix that. But there are creatures named tardigrades. They could fix their DNA under this kind of condition, their DNA changes. And that's interesting to know that scientists have found a kind of gene that is in charge of this fix, but humans don't have this kind of gene. So all in all, I want to say that humans' physical body and genetic structure determine what is beneficial or harmful to you. And the next premise is that every religious instruction is to benefit humans or to protect them against harm. So that's a kind of clear thing, at least for the followers, because if the opposite is true, they're not going to follow that religion. Everybody who follows the religion thinks that, yes, that's going to be beneficial for him. At least it's going to protect him against harm. So putting these two premises together, I'm going to conclude that religious do's and don'ts or instructions are based on our genetic structure. And finally, the conclusions. The first one, as I said, religious instructions are not beyond our genetic structure. They are based on our genetic structure. And second, the religious instructions are intrinsic to us, determined by our physical body and somehow written in the genetic structure. It means that if somebody knows everything about the genetic structure of a creature, and also everything about the whole world and interaction between them, he could design a list of do's and don'ts for that being, for that human. And the third thing is that religious instructions are like instruction manual of life coming from God. And do's and don'ts mean that do's means beneficial and don'ts mean harmful to our personal, familial, and social life. I'm going to find some kind of examples in the literature of science and religion, but the only thing I found was good, actually, was about bodily purity and moral purity. Mean that they had a population of people and did a kind of experiment on them, and they realized that finally the people who are more bodily pure, they did better in the moral activities and ethical things. And actually, I didn't find anything more, but I think it's good if people invest. And finally, we present a compatible structure for science and religion. But you may see some other places that they think religion and science are two different things. They don't have anything to do with each other, and they go two different ways. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Sultani. Is there any questions?
What makes someone bodily pure?
So, oh, that's a good question actually. So it was the cleaning of the body with water. So as a kind of religion, I mean, that's their terminology and that's the type of body with.
By drinking water or
No,
washing
by
oneself
washing.
with?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So the experiment was that they had two groups of people. The one group did that kind of washing of body more than the other, and they did better in the moral activities and ethical things. So as you know, the washing the body, or some part of the body, is a kind of religious instruction in like Judaism, maybe Islam, and I just wanted to mention something like that, a kind of religious instruction.
Okay. And then so, what was the metric for being morally pure? Following instructions, religious instructions, the list of do's and don'ts?
Actually, that's a good question. We can talk about it after the presentation. But what I remember from them was that how just based on some kind of analytics, they see how they not ethical thing. I'm just talking about being good or being kind or this kind of thing. Just kind of manners.
Okay.
Like that.
Thank you.
So what happens in the case when you find genetic markers that seem to give certain individuals a proclivity towards certain behaviors, and they interpret that as the will of God? For example, if there was a gene that made someone more prone to be, unfortunately, racist, and they decided that because that was their genetic marker, that was God speaking to them. So what do you do when there are moral incompatibilities?
So that's a very interesting question, actually. So are you saying that everything the religion directs us towards something means that God is directing us towards that? Is that your question?
I think, if I understand what you're saying, that our genetics are in line fully with God's instructions to us. So what happens when we find things in our genetics that don't seem to align with religious teachings?
Right. That's a very interesting question, actually. So that's true. I mean, our genetic directs us some different ways. For example, when we like to do something means that our genetic is forcing us actually to like that and to do that. But the reason that, I'm not saying that everything that now happens in genetic is basically God's words, and that's actually the subject of the next presentation, is that saying that how the genetic is contaminated by the other things. That's very interesting. Subject is going to be discussed in the next presentation. Sure.
Are intrinsic in us, so what's the need of an external instructions from God as a religion? So our next presenter is MD Tabatabai. She is a researcher in Religious Tourism Association, also Criterion Association. The title of her presentation is The Necessity of Religion from Genetics Point of View.
In this article, first we are going to discuss how human genome changed during time, and then we will mention some examples of silent presence of viral genes in human genome. After that, we will go through that what makes human totality is his genetics. We will follow with the nature of thought and with the question that if a viral genome sits between neural cell genetic material, how it affects human thought. At the end, we will propose that infected thought needs to be replaced, and after that, we will have the conclusion. Human DNA have changed during years by mutations and viral genome inserting themselves into human gene. Scientists have identified 100,000 pieces of retrovirus DNA in our genome, making up 8% of our human genome. That's a huge portion of our DNA, while you consider that only 1% of our genome is making proteins for our body. Our ancestors were infected with retroviruses on a regular basis. On rare occasion, a virus infected a sperm or egg and managed to end up in an embryo. Every new cell in an embryo inherited the retrovirus DNA implanted in its genome. And then the embryo grew up into an adult, which then had offsprings of its own, and passed the virus DNA on as well. And so the viral genome became a part of human species genome. And here we have some examples of silent presence of viruses in human genome. In mid-2000s, a scientist at University of Michigan took a look at blood of people infected with HIV. HIVs killed their patients with exhausting the immune system, allowing all sorts of pathogens to sweep to their bodies. So it wasn't a huge surprise for them to find other viruses in the blood of HIV patients. What was surprising was where these other viruses had come from. They had come from within the own patient's DNA. Another example of viruses integration with human genome is HSV. HSV is a retrovirus which in normal conditions is dormant in our genetics. And in situations like Esther's, which body's conditions change, will cause disease. Because this virus causes physical signs and symptoms, we call it disease easily. But if this virus would cause mental effects and symptoms could not be recognized this easy. Like obsession. Obsession was a mental disease which was not known for a disease for a long time, but today it has several ways to be treated. If a virus causes an infected thought, it is so hard to be diagnosed as a disease. As we told in the previous presentation, shape of a creature, his needs, sufferings, joys, and even civilization of human is based on his genetics. All beliefs, thoughts, tendencies, and interests of a creature is product of his genetics. In fact, what we call speech, behavior, and human thought is the external appearance of the chemical events in our body. In other words, the form of chemical events in our body is derived from our genome. What is thought? Each thought is the product of a physiological event. Any physiological event in human represents an event in DNA level. A thought is a result of production, discharge, increasing and decreasing in the neurotransmitters levels in neural cells. The outcome that which neurotransmitter is being produced will form a thought. If one of the neurotransmitters in neural cells change and would not function correctly, there is no way to prognose what may happen. For example, in diseases like Alzheimer's, depression, Parkinson, and schizophrenia are caused by a minor changes in the amount of same neurotransmitter dopamine. But, for example, in schizophrenia, the amount of this neurotransmitter is higher than normal, and in depression, it is lower than normal. Why such a big difference to human thoughts, conduction, and integrity are observed only by changes in level of a single neurotransmitter? It is not imaginable. What neuropsychiatric disorders like depression, schizophrenia, and mania, individuals infected with HIV virus represents how genomes which are integrated to our genome can cause thought disease. scientists have identified a piece of a virus in nerve tissue of schizophrenic patients, which is another evidence of viral effect on human totality. These are some known evidences of virus effect on thought outbreak. The question is, do all human feelings and thoughts belong to himself? We do not call a destructive belief like racism a disease, but couldn't we bring up the idea that racism is not a product of human genome, and it can be an infected thought due to silent presence of viruses in human genome? Considering the infection of human thought by viral genome, is there any way for human to disable the unhealthy genome? Whether healthy thought can affect unhealthy thought or not. Does changing thought means changing genome level and human totality? Hypnosis is just a thought induction. Hypnosis is just a thought induction. Based on evidences, it is possible to change body metabolism rates just by hypnosis. In fact, with hypnosis, we can affect different aspects of human minds and body. As a matter of fact, a simple thought can change body physiology, and it is not possible unless with gene activating and deactivating. Human beings are the only creatures capable of making change into their integrity and genome by the use of thought. In fact, in human, the prefrontal cortex, which is the judgment and decision-making center, is developed and gives the human the power of taking the lower layers of the brain in control. Frontal lobe distractions by trauma or tumors decreases judgment ability and causes unbridled anger and lust, and etc. On the other hand, anger suppresses frontal lobe inhibitory effects on the lower layers of the brain, which not only causes irrational behavior in an individual, but also the individual would not be alert of his irrational behavior. In contrast, when an individual focuses constantly on a spiritual purpose, functioning frontal lobe, which is the judgment and decision-making center, increases, and also in frontal cingulated lobe, which is mercy center. In an individual with its spiritual beliefs and behaviors, frontal lobe function, judgment and decision-making increases, and lower levels feeling would be easier under control. Based on these facts, we can conclude that a thought is able to change the genome. In other words, when a thought is constructed in upper layers of the brain and it's amplified by belief, is able to take the feeling in lower layers of brain under control, which means turning the genes on and off. Acceptance and belief are physiological events. Belief is a strong and unchangeable structure in the brain. In summary, the human genes have been changed during years due to mutations and joining with viral genome. If these changes happen in neural cells and their product is a thought which is out of human aspect, then correcting of that thought would bring back the human aspect to the person. This would be possible in human due to having the power of thinking, contemplation, and decision-making, and the ability of controlling feelings from lower layers of brain. In fact, considering the nature of thought and the ability of brain in controlling lower layers in brain, replacing healthy and comprehensive thought instead of destructive thought is curative thought. An instruction from a superior knowledge who is dominant to a creature, which can distinguish human genes and its products, thoughts and feelings, and etc., from viral ones is needed for all humans to be able to follow the path that he should as a human.
Any questions?
So, as a person who doesn't have a scientific background, when I hear the word virus, I think bad. Is that always the case? Are there cases where virus infection of genomes could benefit humanity?
Yeah, actually, the first viral genome has been discovered was syncytin, which is a gene that helps the embryo connect to the mother and in the placenta. It connects the embryo to the mother, and it's a beneficial. We don't know before that how the mother could keep the baby in her body, and this is one of the beneficial aspects of viruses.
That's amazing. And I was thinking of when science dialogues with religion, it's important to tell the theologians that this is not necessarily a bad thing, because we are trained to look at power structures so deeply that we think, well, if we can label who has infected thoughts, then they are less humans. So
That's right.
thank you.
So, I'm trying to, let's see if I can sort of restate what the argument is. So there's a form of the human genome which we would consider to be the good or the proper form of the human genome, and then the viruses can cause changes. And then religious instruction, and maybe I'm jumping ahead to part 2 here, but the religious instruction, or if thoughts or intentions are able to change human beings at the genetic level, then religious instruction would be, in a sense, a way to fix problems that have occurred because of the viruses in the genome. So I guess because the question I'm trying to think is, if human thought can change physiology, which that seems pretty apparent, why would you need to then trace God's religious instruction to the human genome when you could just trace, you say, religious instruction can transform human beings for the better? And in other words, why not just keep it at that level? Why does it have to be taken to the next level, the genetic structure itself? Maybe that's where again, I don't want to go too far, get too far ahead here, but that's what I'm just trying to think. I mean, why is following religious instruction not enough? Why do we have to then talk about the genetic structure?
It seems to be presupposing, though, that God and religious instruction are separable from humanity in some way. The religious instruction is external.
Right, and they're saying it's internal, or intrinsic, right? I mean, that's the
I
terminology.
think the next presentation will come.
That's being used.
Yeah.
Okay, right, and so that's where I'm sort of seeing where it's going, and so maybe I'm getting too far ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Continue.
Just
Thank
clean
you so
up
much.
in the right direction.
Okay. Thank you. So we understood that our genetic structure is contaminated by viruses, and we will have the next part of the first presentation with Dr. Borgay. He's a PhD candidate in philosophy, also a research scholar at NEMAAR, and also he's the president of Muslims of the United States. Dr. Borgay.
Okay, hi everybody. First, sorry for worship. Yes, first, sorry for the splitting the first presentation into two parts. We just talk to each other and see that this way of presenting is more coherent. So you just went in a same direction that we just proposed to. I just review the premises here. The first premises was the conception of intrinsic religion based on genetics or genetic structure. That means that what means that there are the rules of God with some very intrinsic and some intrinsic structure. We can say that it's like to claim that there are some physiological or genetic factors that encourage to or inhibit the creature from doing specific actions. It's like, for example, smelling ability in creatures, that by smelling they can find that which food is harmful or beneficial for them. So there is some physiological or genetic based structure in the creature's body which can conduct the creature to do or not to do something. So first of all was the conception of intrinsic religion. The second premise is contamination of this genetic structure with viruses. So the implication is that humans, now the modern humans, don't have the original and intrinsic access to divine do and don'ts at the moment. And so humans is now in need of being externally said what to or what not to do. That is religion. So this is the argument, the big picture of the thesis, that why modern humans, biologically modern humans, are in need of religion. Is some way of explanation, scientific explanation, that why they are in need of this. Going further, this external source, which should clarify the instructions in stating the structures, should firstly have the omniscience of the original structure and contamination both. And second of all, it should be out of any contamination. These two together makes this conclusion that this source, in this sense, should be divine. That is, what we mean by divine is this: has the omniscience of the original structure and contamination together, and be out of any contamination. In this sense, it should be divine. So, by this sense of divine, the term divine, it should be some non-human knowledge, because every human, every aspect of human knowledge is somehow limited or confined or constrained with his physiological structure. Especially empirical science. Empirical science is based on observation. Observation is based on our physiological structure. We can see some parts of the waves and not the other. We can smell some sort of molecules and not the others. So our observation is biased with our physiological structure, so the empirical science which is constructed based on that observation. And the other sort, which is very important for this sense of divine, is it should be dark words of the divine. Why? Because it should, if every set of human knowledge or knowledge propositions are in some sense contaminated with something, so it is in threat of being wrong, maybe. And if we are not sure about that these instructions are exact words of the God, so it may be polluted with some sort of interpretation or deviation to restore the order. So, getting divine with the sense that it should be dark words of the maybe a divine source, let's say God, and it should be non-humanistic. So, this is our premise, as you just formalized it. Divine has instructed some rules to cancel the effects and harms of this impurity. So this devoid of harm and contamination can be accounted as a healing action. So this, we can say that, we can claim that the rules of divine are to bring the original health back to humans. So in this sense, we can say divine instructions are for health. So the way we are stipulating our thesis is some sort of saying that divine instruction is for health, is a health interpretation of religion. Okay, the big picture has these three parts. Firstly, the intrinsic religion, and then contamination and the necessity of a divine religion. And the third is healing attitude. But the question now is that, is this only an abstract stipulation of ours? Is this just some sort of classification, or just saying that, okay, what kind of this religion is good, or are there any evidences in divine religions? We have found in Muslim association, Muslims of the United States Association, that Islam can be a good archetype of these stipulations. Why? Firstly, we should say that Islam, in a sense that I define divine, can be accounted as a divine religion. Why? Firstly, because it is believed to have a holy text, Quran, which is the exact and direct words of God. It is believed so. And second, it is believed that it has not been deviated or changed throughout history. So, according to the belief of Muslims, we can say that, okay, this is a good candidate of the divine in the sense that we have defined divine. Quran, there are evidences for all three postulations of our thesis. Firstly, evidence for the intrinsic religion. The way Quran defines religion is interesting. The term is used in Quran for religion is deen, which means law or rule. And the way in Surah Rum and verse 30 defines religion is interesting. It said that the intrinsic divine fact based on which God has created humans. So, as you see, it's the exact way we just went through intrinsic. So it's intrinsic structure, and maybe divine structure, based on which God has created humans. So it's the definition of religion in Quran. And it's interesting that the term that has been used for this intrinsic thing is fitra, which is rooted from fatara, meaning the beginning, we can say original creation. So the terminology is interesting. The second evidence for contamination, we cannot say that it's just for Quran. We can find it in other holy texts. It's the story of creation of Adam. Let's say human. Contamination on behalf of eating something forbidden. That is, maybe the story is like that. Adam and Hawa went to maybe a tree in heaven and they ate something and they got contaminated in a way that there maybe some cruelty has came out from there. The other evidence is interesting also. The terms for which are used for non-believers in the Quran. One is kafir, which means being covered. The other is mujram, which its root means that getting germ. The other term is maraz, means sickness. The other term is najis, means polluted or contaminated. The other term is mushrik, means getting some partner or share. Now, it's very, very similar, aligned with what we have explained. That is, getting something as a partner in living the virus. And another thing is zalim, which means making hidden or dark. All these terms have something in common, which we can find the same thing as evidences of what we have found now in science. The third evidence for similarity is very interesting. That is for the health conception. That is the literal meaning of Islam term. Islam has rooted from salaman, meaning getting healthy. So the name of Islam has the meaning of health, as a load of getting healthy, meaning making healthy and devoid of harm. You should have known that, have heard that Islam means submission, taslim. But interestingly, submission is also rooted from salam. So, for example, in a war, when someone say to the loser that be submitted, in Arabic means that come to the health, don't go to the harm. No. So get healthy. But maybe for historical or social reasons, to restore it, the meaning has been changed. And if we just ask that, is this consistent with other readings of Quran or other terms which have been used as a synonyms of Muslim in Quran, is also interesting. One term is mu'min, which has come from amana, means safe. So mu'min as a synonym of Muslim can be translated, or should be translated as kept safe. Or Muslim is something with peace, has come from salaha, means from peace, out of conflict or challenge. So it draws some outlines for the health. It should be associated with safety and peace. And this health criterion, this health interpretation gives some criterion for the instruction. It provides a criterion for setting the instructions. They should be in favor of health and avoiding any harm. And also, depicts the destination that is health. Of course, it's not bodily health. It can be spiritual, mental, or social, or whatever. More general meaning of sense of health. And also, it can depict throughout the followers' status. That is, they should be healthy. In Arabic, when you say that I'm Muslim, it cannot mean that you're sick. You should be healthy. So no one can claim that I'm Muslim, but his actions if the action cannot be interpreted in favor of his own health and the society health. So terrorism cannot be an Islamic way in this sense. So whatever is in favor of health, according to this religion, maybe contemporary Islam cannot be translated as this healthy religion, but let's say this healthy religion. Whatever is in favor of health will be mandatory. And otherwise, if harmful, should be kept forbidden. So in conclusion, we had three postulations for our thesis. First one was intrinsic religion, that we saw that we find some evidence as a definition of religion in the Quran, as a holy text. And also, we have found contamination in the first big creation story, which is not specific just for Quran. You can find it in other texts, holy texts. And also the terms that have been used in Quran for non-believers are somehow associated with this contamination conception. And last one was the health conception, which, as I stated, is the meaning, literal meaning of Islam term. With this health interpretation, we can say that this health interpretation is aligned with science. It works as a criterion. It blocks the religious abuse, because it blocks, for example, terrorism or whatever which is harmful to human being personally and individually and generally for society. And also in this way, when we give a criterion, a scientific, clear criterion for the instruction of the religion, we can say that this religion could be accessible for all people. It's not something specific for some specific people, which we say that scholars in the field. With a clear criterion, a person can live an ordinary life, can find the criteria for how he or she would find the way God has instructed in this case. So, thanks for all.
It's good to mention that what we mean by Islam is not the current Islam in the current world.
Yes, I told that you have some image of Islam that maybe you compare this sort of saying with claiming with contemporary arguments in Islam, which are known nowadays. But what we mean by Islam, firstly, we just take some evidences from all the texts of Islam without claiming that maybe Muslims or contemporary Islam believe such a thing or do or act according to this conception. So it's maybe some abstract conception, new maybe conception of Islam, maybe new religion, we can say. So we should not mislead it with the term Islam. We hope that we could find another term for such a religion, maybe, or such a conception of religion. But Islam, because in Arabic is rooted from salam, which means healthy, being healthy. So this is good candidate. Why we should reject that? We should reject the interpretation. Yeah.
So I have several questions for the Lord. I'm wondering about the origin story because on one hand I'm hearing the theological creation narrative and language of going back to original DNA structure as if there is one singular. And then on the other hand, there's talk of virus and mutations and sort of the evolutionary approach. So I'm wondering if you can clarify that.
Yes, the thesis is so that, for example, maybe in a moment, maybe in a creation moment, there was a sort of genetic structure, a kind of sort of DNA structure, which was clean. And it belongs to the origin. Conception of Islam, maybe new religion, we can say. So we should not mislead it with the term Islam. We hope that we could find another term for such a religion, maybe for such a conception of religion. But Islam, because in Arabic has rooted from salam, which means healthy, being healthy. So this is a good candidate. Why we should reject that? We should reject the interpretation. Yeah.
So I have several questions for the Lord. I'm wondering about the origin story because on one hand I'm hearing the theological creation narrative and language of going back to original DNA structure as if there is one singular. And then on the other hand, there's talk of virus and mutations and sort of evolutionary approach. So I'm wondering if you can clarify that.
Yes, the thesis is so that, for example, maybe in a moment, maybe in a creation moment, there was a sort of genetic structure in the original human, in Adam. And then, eventually, some attacks from viruses or whatever, we don't know the true story, happened and polluted this structure something. So, the modern human at the moment does not have the access to that original structure. So, he is now in need of someone, some source, instructed him to So
would someone who believes in the Darwinian sense of evolution be able to see themselves in this, or does this presuppose that you believe that there is a singular?
yes, it's a good question. First of all, it's a thesis. Of course, there should be some more scientific research on this thesis. One of them is the evolution, but the Islamic claim, we can say, Quranic claim about creation is not the evolution as we know as Darwinian evolution. So there is a moment in time that Adam has been created instead. But how we can find that in an evolutionary story is another story. When is the time 10,000 years ago in the Torah story, or 30,000, 100,000, maybe we don't. But the claim is that this creation stands for creation. And that created structure has been polluted, contaminated.
Also, like defining the word health, there was a lot related to health.
Yes. For example, if we want to start, first of all, we got that, Islam has rooted from health. So it should be about a healthy religion. And we came to research that what does this health mean? That's your question. So we found this scientific structure may be good for explanation or clarification of this health conception. That maybe this original health that, as is stated in the Quran, the first human
has been created based on that, and should be a good criteria, a good destination to think about the destiny of health. So originality may be a good thing for health. And also, as I explained, health should not be confined to only bodily or physically health. It should be more generalized, extended the concept to mental, spiritual, social. But this virus attacks may be good explanation of what we mean by sickness. You know, in Quran, interestingly, there are many times, frequently, it is stated that in the heart of the non-believers, there is some sort of sickness. The exact term is that there is some sickness in their heart. Heart means what they think of. There's some maybe brain or something like that. But it is frequently stated there. So maybe this contamination and back to the original health be an explanation, clarification of this health conception.
Does this concept also extend to animals or just humans?
What we think at the moment is that we can say that, you know, when you see, for example, an ant knows what to do at the first moment of its birth. And it knows what is harmful for it, what is beneficial for it. So this kind of ant, we can say that it isn't in need of an external religion. There are some instruction intrinsically biased in its body, and it knows what to do and what not to do.
I'm thinking of animals that have an instinct toward what we would consider in human terms as morally reprehensible behavior, for example, infanticide. What would happen if a human got the gene that compelled them to commit that act, whereas in the animal world would be morally, you couldn't speak about it in moral terms because we presuppose animals do not have the ability to choose right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if the concept of virus and contaminated thoughts does not extend to animals, what you do in the reverse direction where animal behavior is done by humans.
Yes.
In moral terms.
Yes. I agree in some sense with that. Yeah.
As I know, the theory of viral contamination is also in animals. It's not just in humans because the animals are human. So it's probable.
Of course, it probable, but maybe of course, it needs more scientific work to clarify what we claim. It works better for humans because it means that for a return question, I think it's associated with this question, with this query, that is morality can be assigned to animals? Can we have the bad animals or good animals? If we can attribute such a good or bad thing to animals, so maybe such thing has happened. But if it doesn't make sense to attribute good or bad to animals, so maybe this way of speaking about viruses cannot work.
I have a quick answer for her second question about health definition of health. As I know about the retroviral elements that Dr. Tabatawi told about, for example, in schizophrenia, we know that most of these psychological problems, they have some signs like inner fears, doubts, paranoid thoughts. So I find it interesting the words like the the words that you told about Muslims, Mu'min and Muslim, I think, which means having inner safe and peace, being peaceful in society and in yourself. It's, I think, a good criteria to understand what is health. I mean, based on what we know psychologically about the psychological disorders like paranoia, and I think feeling safe and acting safe in the society and with peace I think it's a good criteria.
Can I problematize that for a moment?
Sure.
I'm thinking of psychopathic behavior where people are mentally at peace but doing destructive activities.
Yes.
So I don't know if for me that doesn't quite work every time.
Okay, yes.
But it's a great question, and it's a question we try to answer in
Yes.
theology as well. What does that mean? And I think your quest and your approach is fascinating, especially to try to create a standard for behaviors that do no harm and create peace in your own whole society.
Yes. You know, the main goal of our action, was that, you know, we want to rationalize the religion according to science. You know, we are sick of this saying that, okay, it is bad because it is not stated in our religion, or this sort of scholarly interpretation of religion. That some people say that, okay, we are specialized and we don't know, you ordinary people don't know anything about religion. You know? We as some followers, we love to find some criteria which make this religious structures somehow rational. So this is the history of our research, and we have found this kind of conception somehow clarifying the criterion for the structure.
And you know, as you said that animal genes have been infected or not, the answer is yes, they have been infected, as human genome has been infected. But you know, that's the only opportunity in human beings that frontal cortex can control the and lower levels of our brain, but this opportunity is not possible in animals. So when there is no opportunity, so there is no for them, no profit messenger for them, you know, that is not possible. But when there is opportunity, so the profit messenger and groups and ways how to solve, how to think, how to behave for correcting this infection and being healthy.
So we are not totally ruled, we are not totally determined, but we can override
Yeah,
thoughts that are
yeah,
not
human beings can be, yeah, override.
Maybe only humans are in a place that can decide what to do or what not to do. And maybe this viruses just sit in a place that we decide for our actions. So maybe it cannot be attributed or assigned to animals in this sense. Of course, maybe you ask that, what's the exact distinction between animal and human biologically? It's hard
That's
to
another
say.
conversation.
Yeah,
That's another story.
it's nice. I've actually heard Dr. Borge's presentation before, and I've researched a bit, and I've seen some correlations between the psychological disorders like schizophrenia and that 8% part of our genome which they found, which is actually viral. So they found that, I think it was in Nature magazine, they found that the people who have that 8% more active in their genome, they are more prone to get psychological disorders like schizophrenia.
And it just came to my mind that maybe in some sort of animals that they are at the moment are in threat of being just disappeared from Earth. Maybe you can find some line of these viruses. Maybe they cannot at the moment they cannot behave as they they did maybe a million years ago. And that's why maybe they're going to disappear in the earth. Maybe it could be an explanation. Maybe if scientists goes and just compare the genomes of a tiger, the modern tiger, and a past tiger, maybe they could find some virus attacks inside there. And maybe if, for example, at the moment they are more prone to some danger because they're willing to live alone more than being in a society or community of tigers. Maybe that's because of some virus attack, maybe. And that's why they cannot live more anymore in our earth, maybe. So, but my example was for some very good examples of animals, which now we know that they are like ants. They can live very strongly in the earth, and we think that, as scientists think that they can live very easily in the earth. So the behavior, the action should be somehow intrinsically healthy and just can be compatible to their original genes. Maybe there is no contamination of the virus. So if I just want to restate our statement about animals, contamination, maybe we could find some sort of signs there, similar. But firstly, we should clarify the meaning of morality and animals as first step. And second, we think that what's the healthy behavior or action of an animal in an earth, in a living world. And then we can say that, okay, for humans it's very easy to say that, okay, this kind of action is somehow related to sickness. It's not healthy. But for ants, it's somewhat difficult to say that it's not healthy. If we can clarify what the healthy ant means, then we can say that, okay, go and see that what is the reason of this non-healthy or sickness of that ant.
I think you raise an important point that the rhetorical element of this is quite important.
Yeah.
That even words like virus and sickness and contamination have such a negative aspect to them that when you apply it to morality, it automatically creates a hierarchy of people, who are healthy and not healthy. So that's difficult. It's difficult to.
Yeah. But I think that there's some step in finding some criteria and clarification of the conception of health at the first step, and at the next stage to clarify the meaning of religion and religious doctrine.
And it seems strange that no one has found that this infected genome has effects on our thoughts and feelings, But that's new finding, scientific finding that says that this part of our genome has effect on us. Because before that, they saw that all the viral parts are in joint DNA, which is inactive. So they saw that we are safe. So they don't have any effect on us. But after a while, they found that all of our genomes are active directly or indirectly. How? The part that produces proteins is active directly, but the other part, which we call it giant DNA, regulates the other part. So we see that if we have any viral genes in our genome, so it affects us directly or indirectly. So it's obvious that it has for sure any effect on us.
It's exciting.
So, I know we don't. Well, we have
we
a
have
few minutes
time.
left. So I guess the first step in understanding something is trying to put it in your own terms, and then have you sort of tell me where I'm not, and then put it in your terms, and we can kind of go back and forth. So what I'm kind of seeing here is an attempt at an Islamic sort of natural law morality, or similar to, but then there'll always be places where, right, because, okay, so in Western philosophy, there has been the tradition of natural religion, where human beings only need to use their reason in order to find out what they ought to do. Then there's the tradition of revealed religion, which is you've got it in a book somewhere, or a prophet, or someone gives you the commands and you follow the commands, and that tells you what you ought to do. And so it seems like the problem of natural religion is that human beings can make mistakes, and human beings can, miss things, and human reason isn't always infallible. So you need some form of revealed religion to sort of correct the mistakes that human reason makes. So maybe natural law, because I do Western philosophy, I sort of have to think it in the direction of Thomas Aquinas, who took a more what we would call a divine command, took a sort of a divine command approach, which is all you need to do to be good is follow the laws that are in the book. You don't have to, if it goes against sort of natural feelings, you don't have to worry about that. Trying to combine that with a more kind of natural religion, right? Human beings can use their reason to figure out a lot of stuff, and then there are some things that human beings are going to need to have a kind of revealed religion to help them get over the places where they can't figure it out. Is this similar to what you're talking about here? In other words, it's not simply following the laws that are in the Quran because they are the laws that are in the Quran and that's it. It's that there is actually a natural you can follow natural law, which is in the human genome, except that there are some errors in the human genome now because of this virus, and so therefore this is where the revelation comes in to sort of correct those mistakes that are now in there as because of the viral genome.
Yeah, I agree in some sense.
Right. So.
With the line that you're just going, but I agree in this sense that this thesis, or maybe Quran thesis, is somehow some attempt to reconcile the natural law that is intrinsic or are intrinsic in our basis, and with the answer to this question, why this intrinsic religious body or a person is now in need of external civil to
right.
At this sense, yes, that is similar. But if we say that everything is which is in Quran, if we can just find in the Quran, should be taken as a law that we should not think or seek for any rationale behind that.
Right, just follow the law, right?
Yeah, I think it's not correct because many of rules of Quran has been instructed to the specific people in a specific area, in a specific era. So it's like a formula, an equation, a mathematical equation. The equation is, we can say that it has been kept intrinsically correct, But the variables, the history, time, space, people, audience, language, or whatever, the social and historical situation has entered in place of these variables, changed through history and through situation, social, historical situations. So maybe, and if we do not seek for the rationality, that is the equation, which are intrinsically hidden or dormant in us, then in new situation, in modern situation, we don't know what to do. And the design of our atom is this kind of thing. We are going to find that equation. We think that, we intrinsically had access to something, and by that we are not in need of any maybe profit or anything. At some moment we knew what to do or what not to do, but something happened. Maybe the story of contamination, eating something from forbidden tree, or some sort of story has happened, and we think that in each era of the story, in each specific kind of situation, this equation has some specific answers. So it is not saying that or claiming that whatever are in Quran should be kept holy, and we should think of why at that moment, at that situation, God has instructed this kind of instruction to specific people. And this is very important. What you explained about Islam, saying that it is just natural law, has this threat, danger for just as what ISIS do at the moment, just taking some text from Quran, saying that okay, we should apply that in the moment.
Right.
And they kill people for that.
Right. Well, what I'm saying, the natural law, at least in the Western tradition, is you don't need a revealed text to know what to do. You're following your intrinsic, inherent law, and what someone who just looked at the Quran and said, let's just do what it says here, would be following what we would call a divine command approach.
Yes.
And so somewhere in the middle is right. Somewhere in the middle is sort of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Yeah.
This is the act of reconciling, but I think the sense is somehow different. It's more
Right.
scientific.
Sure. Of course. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for being
Thank you.
here.
Thank you.